Pictures. Hello, hello, and welcome back to another new episode of Dark Shad-Bros. I am one of your hosts for the evening, Peter Mack, and if I sound a little under the weather, it is this ungodly East Coast weather we have been having. The air quality has been absolute shite, to make it sound a little classy. We need Collinsport weather right now. We need rain and cold and mist and more mist. That's an inside joke. So if I sound a little hoarse, I apologize, guys. Welcome back, and we want to take this time to all of you who have followed us so faithfully week after week. We are thrilled that we're hitting our 9th episode tonight. First of all, if you are tuning in live, please know that later on we need you and want you to go onto YouTube, whether it's on Dark Shad-Bros, on the Peter Mack Network, or Mac and Chat. Like and subscribe. Please hit like and subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us a lot with keeping our audience building and keeping these shows coming. So all you have to do later on is hit like and subscribe. So now, for those of you who don't know me, and there's absolutely no reason in this whole world why you should, my name is Peter Mack, not Victoria Winters, who we'll be talking about in a minute. I work primarily as a musical theater performer, cabaret artist, a Judy Garland tribute artist, all live, no lip sync, plus a cadre of other ladies of the golden age of Hollywood television and Broadway. And as myself, yes, I can actually perform in pants on occasion. I've been a Dark Shadows fan officially since I was 12 years old, started going to the annual conventions, started writing one-act comedies with the Collinsport Players. Fortunate enough to work with some of the stars like the late, great Laura Parker, Nancy Barrett, Marie Wallace, Donna Wandry, and so on and so forth. Now I am going to introduce you to our next guest host, Mr. Michael Panzerato.
Hello, everyone from hot as hell Baltimore area. I'm beginning to think that I have stepped into Diablos's waiting room. Thank you for watching. For those of you who have tuned in faithfully, we thank you very much. And for those who haven't, well, how dare you? Keep hitting like and subscribe. Keep watching. The topics get more fun. We get more engaged in each other. It's been a blast. I have been a fan of Dark Shadows since I was 8, 9, something along those lines, and it's still going strong, and I'm still watching it all the time. So keep tuning in. We love you very much. And now on to the next host,
and that would be my other half, Dr. John Mack.
Hello. Charmers. Thank you very much. My name is Dr. John Mack. Peter and I are a couple. We've been together for 22 years, and we've never had a fight since this broadcast started. And I, too, am a performer. I have a smaller cadre of women that I perform as, most notably B. Arthur, Ethel Merman, Joan Crawford, and from this lovely show I have played Grayson Hall not once but twice in 2 different of the skits that Peter wrote for the Collinsport Players. I come from a acting family. My godparents were Richard Waring, who played Betty Davis's brother in the film Mr. Skeffington, and my godmom was Florida Freebus, who was Dobie Gillis's mom. So that being said, I'm going to bring in the rest of our co-hosts. Here we go. And
Are we all in? Wait,
Padre, I can't
where's
even
everybody?
see mine.
Where's Michael? Bring Michael in. There we go.
there he is.
There are all the bros.
Oh, and like and subscribe, please.
Yes, like and subscribe. And Michael, I thought it and you said it. It's like Angelique going down into the depths of hell to meet Diabolos, who wore eyeglasses. Did anybody catch that when they were watching the show? You can see the guy wearing his eyeglasses under the hood.
What actor was who was that actor?
Oh God, who played Diabolos? That's a great question. We'd have to Google it and find out. Who played Diabolos?
Please hold. Are you looking it up, Michael?
I think Michael is going to look it up. Diablos. Beelzebub.
On Dark Shadows.
And he had other names.
Nick. Old Scratch.
Lucifer.
Dwayne
Satan.
Morris is the actor credited for several minor monstrous Dark Shadows roles, most notably Diablos.
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 Who apparently borrowed his hood from Oberon or Haza, the Leviathans.
Oh, interesting. Hey, I have a question for you.
Dan Curtis spared no expense. Absolutely no expense.
I have a question for you guys. So they leaked a couple of pages of the paper doll book that's coming out at the Jonathan Frid event. And in the Jim Storm one, there was a couple of different changes of clothing, but there was a mask. What was that mask?
Is it gold?
Yes.
Oh,
Go ahead, Michael.
yeah, the death mask. It's a death mask or something, right? Isn't it? And it
Yeah,
belongs
it's
to Judah.
It belongs
It
to.
belonged to Judah Zachary.
It's
The
what
jewel?
brings him to life, if I'm not mistaken.
Got
That's what
it.
like.
And that has nothing to do with this episode.
Well, no, you
Sorry.
mentioned the paper dolls because we had heard there was some new merchandise in the works.
Yep.
And of course, they just had the great Dark Shadows Remembrance Weekend in California, which we were very sad not to be a part of. But
All three of us wanted to be
all
there.
three of us wanted to be there. We just couldn't make it work. It looked like it was fun. It looked like there were some really cool things that happened. The lovely tribute to Lamar, Laura Parker on Friday night, and then the wonderful centennial celebration of Jonathan Frid. I believe David Selby read letters that Jonathan had written to his mom
Oh, wow.
from the time he was started as Barnabas and going through into the 80s up until she died. So, like, he read a plethora of these letters,
How amazing.
which was videotaped, but I don't know if they're going to do anything about that videotape. There's been some
Oh.
tumult about the videotape, whether it was supposed to be videotaped or not, and I hope they share it with those of us who couldn't be there because we would love to see it. Are we all agreed on that?
Agreed.
100%.
Listen, if we didn't have
Absolutely.
YouTube, there are many Dark Shadows fans who would not be Dark Shadows fans because they would not have stumbled across the show. Okay, I'm off my soapbox.
And, as another witch has pointed out, one of my favorite witches, Bette Midler as Miss Sanderson, you know, I think she was kind of anti-YouTube when it first came out, and then came around saying, like, quit shutting people down because what a great learning tool. You
Yeah.
know, the fact that this stuff is being archived and shared, so I kind of wish they would look at it that way rather than piracy. I'm not saying you should put up whole movies and steal from,
Of course
you know,
not.
whoever. But stuff like this should be shared with the public. Just throwing that out there in case anyone of note is listening. We would love to see clips from the Remembrance Weekend. And Catherine Lee Scott has actually shared her interview
And when we show
with
clips,
David Hennessy.
let's just remind our audience that when we show clips, they're for entertainment and educational purposes only. We do not own the copyright, no infringement intended. It's just to introduce the show to new audiences.
This is absolutely correct. We do not monetize on this. We make no money on this, guys.
We do
so, strictly for educational purposes. Now, we just celebrated the 58th anniversary of Dark Shadows premiering, June 27th, 1966. Of course, the show is remembered primarily for Barnabas Collins because he was the one who saved the show from oblivion. But we tend to forget that it all started with a young, dark-haired girl on a train girl who hopped a train from New York, who received an offer letter to come and be a governess to a troubled young boy from one Elizabeth Collins Stoddard, and that, of course, is Miss Victoria Winters. I personally feel when I go on and read boards that Vicky is so maligned by fans. They make fun of her. She's just a hapless victim. I mean, even to a degree, Alexandra Moltke has said that she was kind of a, you know, overwrought victim at times. She described her as being intrepid. But she was such a pivotal part of the story. We saw the world of Collinsport through Victoria Winters' eyes. I always equate her with Dorothy Gale in The Wizard of Oz, because even before the show went out into the spooko, Collinsport is not your ordinary place. Collinwood is not an ordinary place. And Vicky is the eyes of the audience. Thoughts from the panel?
I was just going to say, I think one of the reasons why, to me, Barnabas stood out so much was because Vicky was there pointing out how much he stood out. In other words, amid the Collinses, I mean, he had a coat and a cane and all that. He was a bit different, but around Elizabeth and Roger, he didn't stand out too much. Had you not had her constantly talking about how courtly he was, or how much he knew about past, or the look in his eyes, or the sadness, or he seems to have meaning wrapped behind every word, we wouldn't have had that feeling. He would have sort of blended a little bit, or just become the villain. I think Victoria was an absolutely necessary part of the series. And before Maggie Evans, there was Victoria. I mean, Victoria was the closest thing to Josette in all of those episodes. There was a kind of kindred thing going on there, and she, so I don't know. I totally get kind of heroine, damsel in distress thing that everybody's saying, but I see her as absolutely necessary to those early days of the show. And I don't know that where Maggie was when all that started, she would have been able to do that for Barnabas. I think that she was too much of a tough guy, whereas Vicky was she was taken with all of that. She was swept up by the feeling of almost like American royalty and all of that. She enjoyed. So I think she was completely necessary and beautifully played.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, too, that, well, first of all, according to Dan Curtis, they languished in trying to find Victoria Winters, who initially was in a preliminary story drafts was called Sheila, not Victoria.
Really?
Yes, she was originally called Sheila for about 2 minutes. And then I think they thought, no, she needs to be elegant. Probably because they were going to go down that kind of Anastasia route eventually. So Victoria is a much, grander, gothic.
The 4 syllables makes a huge difference. I know that sounds silly, but
yeah. Well, Sheila is also just a very kind of plain name.
I'm a nanny from an orphanage. My name is Sheila. Hey.
Exactly. Exactly.
And for those who don't realize it, how did she get her name? Because she was dropped at the Hammond family home.
Yes.
On the doorstep with a note that read, "Her name is Victoria. I cannot take care of her." And it was January or February. And that is how she got the name Winters, chosen by the people at the foundling home. But yeah, again, according to Dan Curtis, they could not find his idea. Now, of course, the legend goes that Dan was having a dream one night, dark-haired girl on a train, reading a note about how she had been hired to be a governess to a young boy at an English estate. And she shows up at the estate, the doors open, and just as the doors opened, he woke up. And he was going to have a meeting, I believe, with Leonard Goldberg over at ABC. They were going to discuss another show. And Leonard said, "Do you have any other ideas?" And he's like, "Well, kinda, sort of." And he mentioned this dream. And Leonard said, we should do this as a daytime show. And Curtis said, no, this isn't a daytime show. It's a nighttime show. And they argued back and forth. And he said, well, what kind of a order, what kind of a cycle can you give me? And he said, 13 weeks. Not enough. I need 26. You got it. And that's how deals are made. And that's how the show. But it was, now, according to Art Wallace, who was a story consultant on the show and wrote a lot of those first episodes, this dream was a lot of BS. We won't go into all the details here, but I think there was some litigation between Art and Dan Curtis. Eventually, they parted ways when the new series came out in 1991. He was given a special credit of certain characters and storylines developed by Art Wallace, whereas originally there was some argument about over who had created the actual series, because Art had written the Bible for the series. So there was a lot of mishigas about who really came up with the idea, and Art denied emphatically that there had ever been a dream. I choose to believe that Dan had the dream.
He had a dream.
He had a dream. I love those early episodes. I love Victoria. I love the way Alexandra plays her. Laura Parker said she was just so natural. She loved watching her because she was just so natural and so real. It was like she wasn't even acting. And one of the things I really liked was the kinship she had with Nancy Barrett. They clicked instantly on camera as well as off camera. They became very, very good friends. They're still good friends to this day.
They maintain friendship, yeah.
And there's a clip from that first week that I really love. It's one of my favorites because you kind of get the idea like, wow, these two could almost be sisters. Let's play that clip.
Still a light under the door and thought I might borrow a cup of sugar. You're Carolyn. And you're Victoria. Or is it Vicky?
Either one doesn't make any difference, whichever you like.
Well, Vicky, on behalf of myself and my kooky family, I bid you welcome to the House of Usher.
Thanks.
On second thought, I'd be glad to help you pack.
Well, not tonight.
Well, I guess there's some of us who just love to suffer. Oh, you sure I'm not disturbing you? I have a bad habit of just popping in.
Oh, no, not at all. I was just writing a letter to a friend back home. Why don't you sit down?
When you write to your friend, all you have to say is one word. Help! Vicky, you seem like a nice person. Do yourself a favor. Go back home to New York.
You know, I've been hearing that every hour on the hour since I got here. Why does everyone want me to go home?
Oh, I didn't say I want you to go. Heck no, it'll be a ball having somebody around here to talk to. But you've been in this mausoleum a couple of hours. Do you think it'll be fun and games?
I'm willing to find out.
Victoria Winters, I think I'm gonna like you.
I love that scene. They're so sweet together.
I agree, and it was so smooth.
Very smooth, and a little interesting fact for those who are not up on the ins and outs of this stuff. Nancy actually auditioned for Victoria Winters. That's who she was submitted for. And she just thought, well, she's all right. She's a little on the sweet side. And she just thought she was totally wrong for the part. And she said, then I read Carolyn. I thought, she dances too much. She's got too much hair. She's got too much clothes. She's me.
Now, isn't it? Was it on a panel? I think when they had Dan Curtis, it was a panel of them that Nancy Barrett and Miss Moltke were there.
Yes.
And they were talking, and all of a sudden Nancy said, "Hey, wait a minute! I think you might be my sister."
That's right.
Something along those lines. And when I watch that panel scene, I always go back to that that scene and think, oh wow, you know, you're the one who saw that coming, you know. So yeah, it's great. It's almost
Yeah,
like the David and Elizabeth scene, that kind of sweet, cozy family. You forget they're sometimes they're family.
Right.
very much so. And I love all of those scenes in the bedroom. There's a lot of really sweet scenes between the two of them where Carolyn always winds up in Victoria's bedroom, which is interesting. That was Elizabeth's room growing up. So I thought it was very interesting that because it was the nicest bedroom, I thought, of all of them. And it was Elizabeth's, and she gave it to Vicky, which I thought was another little tidbit in there that,
Yeah.
why would she give her the room that she slept in until she got married?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting the relationship with between Elizabeth and Vicky. You know you knowing you're consciously you're watching a scene with the employee employer. Never do you have that impression in any of their scenes that there's no relationship there besides this is my nephew's nanny. She treats her in everything they play like a mother would. It's very interesting. No different from David or from Salem.
That's a great lead in. That's a great lead in, Michael, because you're right. Until Vicky starts to poke her nose in just a little too much, that's when Elizabeth gets, the fur on her back goes up, and Vicky finally has it. And this happens several times, and this is where Vicky doesn't get enough credit. Roger comes after her, Carolyn comes after her, David, forget it, and Elizabeth too is also getting on her case. And finally, Vicky decides, I've had enough of this bullshit. You know what? I'm nice, but you're stepping on my toes. And this is proof positive that Victoria Winters had a backbone when she needed to.
Mr. Collins, please. Roger, did you tell Vicky she could skip David's lessons today? Well, don't you think I should have been told? I see. Well, you put me in a very embarrassing position. I said a great many things that... Well, in the future, please check with me first. Goodbye.
David's nowhere to be found.
Vicky, I owe you an apology. I'm sorry for what I said.
I'm sorry that you found it necessary to call your brother and check on my story.
I called Roger to tell him to stop interfering with the order of this house.
And check on me.
I beg your pardon.
Mrs. Stoddard, ever since I've been in this house, I've been badgered and bullied, and most of the time I've taken it. But there comes a limit, even for me. And when I walked in here and heard you on the phone, that was the last straw. I don't lie, Mrs. Stoddard. I don't snoop, and I don't pry, and I don't steal other people's boyfriends.
And I don't like being shouted at.
I was a fool. I should have packed up my first night here. But I'm going to stay, and I'm not going to sit by and take all this nonsense.
I think you're forgetting you're still in my employ.
Then fire me if you want to. Either that or begin trusting me. One or the other, Mrs. Stoddard. I'm sorry, but it's the only way I can live here.
I know. And I'm truly sorry. Will you forgive me?
You'll forgive me for shouting at you.
Oh, Vicky, I don't think you know how fond of you I've become. I know it's lonely and difficult for you here.
I haven't had much chance to be lonely.
When I wrote and asked you to come, I had no idea there'd be so many difficulties, so many pressures.
I'm sure they won't last forever.
I hope not. Sometimes I feel as if I were buried here, as though there were no outside world at all.
I love it. Go get 'em, Vicky. I love it.
She's so amazing.
She was pretty tough. She was pretty, but very sweet. She knows she wasn't. She laid down the boundary, and she was very respectful.
Yes.
So.
And
they're fun to watch together.
So much fun.
And in those two shots, you can see how much they look alike, how much she really could be her daughter. I just love that.
We've talked about that before. One of the reasons that she did get the job was because the creative team was saying, doesn't she look like Joan?
Yeah.
And so they brought her in, and they brought Joan into the fishbowl, had her glasses off, and she was like, what's my daughter doing down on the soundstage? Are you trying to pull a fast one on me? And they were like, okay, that's it. That's
The head of hair on the both of them. My God, I don't know if maybe if Joan Bennett wore a fall, but I was looking at all the hair they both had.
you and me both. Jones is a piece. Alexandra's not wearing a fall. She's the only actress that didn't wear a fall, and we used to joke like that hair was so big you could have found Jimmy Hoffa in it.
I mean, it is. She had a look at it from behind.
She still does. She still has those tresses.
Miss Moltke's family were nobility in real life, weren't they? Her father, and there's a mention of one of their relatives in this movie with Christopher Plummer, one of his last movies. I can't remember the name of it, where he plays Kaiser Wilhelm, and he says, if Moltke had listened to me, da da da. And I'm thinking, oh wow, there's a little DS connection there.
Yeah, she was smuggled. Was this just during the war? God, I want to get the history of this right. But smuggled over like in a laundry basket almost, kind of a thing. How the family got over here. It's in the Dark Shadows Companion. They go into detail.
Yeah.
About how she got over here. Yeah, totally fascinating. But I love that.
Victoria winners.
Dropped in a laundry basket.
Right.
She was actually double nobility on both sides of the family. So her mom's family was Danish royalty, and her dad's family was German Prussian royalty. And during the outbreak of the war, the mother was smuggled out of Germany because they were anti-Nazi. And so there's a whole fascinating lineage and stories about that. Worth a Google and worth a read for sure.
And there's also, we always talk about, where the trajectory of the story was going to go. I think it's clear that the intent was to reveal that she was Elizabeth's daughter somewhere down the line. When Barnabas came into it, she kind of got knocked to the side.
We have a new watcher.
Hello.
Her name is Carrie Perwicka, and Carrie says, love your guys' shows. Started watching Dark Shadows in 2010. I'm on my third time rewatching it. So, welcome, Carrie.
Hey, Carrie. Thanks for tuning in.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, not at all. Not at all. Keep watching. Keep watching. What was I saying? Wait. The trajectory of the story. Yeah. So I think when Jonathan came into it, she kind of got pushed aside just a little bit till we get to 1795. But you mentioned her and Josette being so kindred, and obviously Josette always uses her as the medium to speak through. I don't have the clip. I wish I did. I couldn't pull it up. But after she's rescued from Matthew Morgan's clutches and they get her back to Collinwood, she says to Elizabeth, I felt as though Josette was watching me all the time, that I was in the old house, that she was watching over me. And when she was talking to me, I thought as though I was talking to myself, as though she and I are one and the same person. I think I even look a little bit like the portrait. And Elizabeth dismisses her and says, you don't look anything like the portrait of Josette. And I wonder if they were going to go down that road, and then she was with Matthew, she was fighting off Laura, and they thought, we got to give Catherine an A storyline. So they switched it over to Maggie rather than having it be Vicky.
Right. Could be. I mean, they do a lot of that in that show. They seem very clear on intent. then something behind the scenes or something happened and their minds changed. Just like I said, Nicholas Blair, I'm convinced was supposed to be the devil, at least in those initial episodes, and then that took a sharp turn into just being a warlock. I think it's the same thing. I agree with you. I think that they maybe wanted to steer the ship, just take the eyes off of her for a few minutes or something. But I do think that it's clearly a desire of the writers, maybe even just privately, like a pet thing they had behind the, let's make her feel like her daughter. When she buys Andy's portrait, it doesn't, that whole thing doesn't get much more mother and daughter. She takes her
Right.
shopping, they have lunch. I mean, Carolyn, where the hell's your, I mean, she's off doing something else. She's taking her to the graveyard. She bought the portrait with her. They were having a, very clearly having a lovely day,
Yep.
and a very mother-daughter. So I agree with you 100 behind the scenes writers thing where whatever, but it worked.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because I remember seeing that a few months ago, and I was like, I totally forgot about that scene. And I thought clearly the writers were going to go down that road, and then maybe someone thought, Vicky's been so central, and Catherine was is a very strong actress, and
Oh
actually
yeah.
looked a little bit more like the portrait than Vicky did.
And then I wonder maybe if it was like an economic thing, like who knows how far they planned, and how the hell are we going to pull this off in 1795, have her playing both roles? We need maybe a resemblance, and then we'll use, could be just a logistics thing. But I agree with you. They had to have made that change for a distinct reason, to pull it off of. And Miss Lee Scott is a very, very good actress. I mean,
Very
that's
good.
she's a very strong, and I think she brought dimensions to. Let me say this: I think that her Josette and Miss Monica's Josette, had she played it, would have Miss Monica would have resembled the Josette that I love in the revival. I think the two
Yes.
of them would have been similar. Likable, I think, is the word I'm looking for.
Well,
I mean,
Josette is a
not
spoiled
long,
brat,
but right, exactly. And I think, so that's something that's kind of cool too. But
which is
Scott played a
unfortunate.
really strong character.
I blame Sam Hall and Gordon Russell for that because the Josette they were establishing was this pure entity of love. And I think it kind of went into where Elizabeth said, I want you to get a real, no rose colored glasses view of the past. And she idolized Josette so much. So they thought, we're going to turn the tables and have Josette actually turn on her. Here's her hero.
And I think that also made, Angelique that much more appealing, because if you had a boss that was, you know, you grew up, they more or less grew up together, but Josette was kind of like a, spoiled. You can see the need for the competition between, as children, Angelique and Josette, and you kind of do, like, I enjoy Angelique a great deal more than I do Josette. There are times when you're grateful for the cliff. So, I think it was. I'm happy. I'm very happy that we got Angelique the way we got her. So I'm glad things worked out the way they did. But
And you mentioned
you wonder what the hell's
economics.
Barnabas's problem.
You mentioned
Yes.
economics because all of a sudden then Alexandra was doing voiceovers for episodes she wasn't in, and she wasn't getting paid. And Dan apparently didn't see the need to pay her for just doing a voiceover. So very quickly now, all of a sudden, the other cast members, there's no more. My name is Victoria Winters. All of a sudden, whoop! People always wonder, like, what happened? What happened to My Name is Victoria? Because
True.
she wanted to get paid for her voiceovers, and they were like, nah, we'll just use the other actors. That's all.
Wow.
Do you know what's interesting is I just saw Miss Going's Instagram recently, and she has a really pretty picture of her outdoors. But the caption was, "My name is Victoria Winters." I thought that was really, really sweet.
And we'll definitely delve into Joanna when we talk about the new show because she was great. She was
Oh yeah.
great. But those early episodes, there's so much going on. There's so much drama. And poor Vicky, she really is getting pulled in all directions. She wants David to like her. She wants Carolyn to like her. You know, Carolyn already has a boyfriend. Now she wants Burke Devlin. Burke Devlin is interested in Victoria. Carolyn hates her. She loves her. She hates her. She loves her. You know, Roger is sneaking up behind her and basically chloroforming her face. This poor girl goes through the mill.
And she stuck it all out.
She
The loyal
always
Collins.
she always stuck it out. One of my other favorite Victoria moments comes during the Laura storyline because she's conflicted. She's conflicted because she knows what it's like not to have a mother. So in the beginning, she's encouraging this mother son relationship until she realizes something is rotten in the state of Denmark.
Yeah.
And then she becomes very, very maternal to David and has to when Laura puts the whammy on Elizabeth.
Mm.
When the story starts to come to a head, I love how Vicky sticks it to Laura because she's determined she's going to snatch this kid away and into the flames. And they've got this whole plan going on. Dr. Guthrie, who I adored, I was so sad when they killed him off. Carolyn, they're all in cahoots with each other to try to figure out a way to get him out of Laura's clutches. And I love this scene between, again, it just shows that Vicky could be tough and very insightful and assert her territory when she needed to. Take a look.
Mhm.
Why don't we go down to the cottage right now?
But I have to go
I'll bet they don't have any important place to take you at all.
Well, Dr. Guthrie said that I'd like it, and that I could stay up real late.
Oh, well, if you want to stay up very late, you can come down and we can stay up late together. Why don't we go now and we'll phone later and say where you are?
I can't. I promised Miss Winters I'd stay right in this very spot.
Oh, did you?
Well, yes, he did. And I think it's very good that he can carry out his instructions so well.
David is planning on spending the night with me. Didn't he tell you? He has something else to do.
I did tell her.
Yes, well, I'm sure it can't be that important.
But it is.
Well, what is it?
He has to go someplace.
Well, where could a child be going at this hour of night?
That's a surprise for David.
Well, can't it be put off till another night?
Absolutely not.
Vicky, I very much appreciate your dedication, your efficiency. However, I would prefer David to be with me tonight, and I'm sure he would too.
Well, I'm sure he would too, but perhaps tomorrow or the next night.
Yes, Mother, tomorrow would be fine.
Come along, David. Very soon, we may know everything there is to know. Until then, you know how things stand.
Oh, yes. Yes, I know exactly how they stand.
Ooh.
I love that scene because Victoria is so saying like, bitch, I am on to you.
Vicky burns her. Mm-hmm.
And she looks so chic doing it. Like she stepped off the cover of Vogue magazine with her raincoat and scarf and such.
I love
Yeah,
that
that's a
look.
beauty. That's a
I love that, yeah, the way she
Yeah.
looks so sharp.
Mm-hmm.
But it's one of my favorite
But
scenes.
she did. That was great. Always reminds me, like the Laura thing always reminds me of what I call Collinwood amnesia. You know, they stumble from a ghost to a phoenix, a rescuing ghost to a phoenix, to a vampire, and they're like, there's no, hey, we just faced off a phoenix, maybe it's something else weird going on here. To like, and the best line drop of all was when Barnabas is telling Julia about the werewolf, and he goes, now, Julia, don't laugh, there's precedent for this. I'm like, I'm sorry. Aren't you a vampire? Didn't you just cure him from, and you're finding the werewolf hard to swallow? That reminds me of that, Laura sort of forgotten about when Barnabas comes along,
Same
so
with Dr. Lang when he tells him, oh, it was a curse. Oh, a curse was responsible. Then he goes to help him and give him the talisman, and it's like, oh, Barnabas, you're being ridiculous. There's no such thing as witches. He's like I told you how I got this way.
I'm the living dead asshole. But she
Uh,
she finished off that great. She had that was a great mic drop too. Won't be too long before we know what we need to know. And boom, out the door. Great
she
mic
yeah,
drop moment.
she works so well in that storyline. I mean, the chemistry between her and Mitch Ryan, which I loved. Sadly, I don't have any clips
Yeah.
of her and Mitch, but she and Mitch just I thought they made a really plausible, sweet couple. I was so upset when things took the turn that they did because I really wanted to see Vicky wind up with Burke.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you mean by that you mean Mitch Ryan leaving, or do you mean the Bellum? Bellum.
I think all of the above. And with all due
Right.
respect to Anthony George, I mean he grows on you after a while, but it wasn't the same. He just was against type. I don't know why they couldn't find another square jawed, strapping guy. I think I've said this to you before, Anthony. We'll do a whole panel about Burke Devlin, but he was kind of, there was that piss elegant.
Yeah, I think that I said this I think a couple weeks ago. I would have really loved to see the Barnabas tension played out with Mitch Ryan because it would have been on a whole nother
Yeah.
level.
Yeah.
There was no doubt that Barnabas. This is the terrible thing, and I like Anthony George a lot. I think, like you said, he had a kind of Rat Pack feel to him. But Barnabas, there was no doubt Barnabas was going to win that tournament. Like that feud Barnabas was. Whereas with Mitch Ryan, I think we could have thought, I don't know, man. Like when he sees him with David in the cemetery, and I don't know. I don't. We would have kept guessing. I think. So I'm with you. I like Anthony George a lot. I just think that Mitch Ryan was it as far as Burke.
And again, with Vicky in this, she's always sticking her neck out. I love. Well, first of all, but then I got conflicted because I do like Frank Garner. Now they made a cute couple as well. They were a very plausible couple, and there was another character I was sorry to see go because he had that. I don't know. There was something cuddly and yet sexy about. Oh God, his name just went out of my head. Connard,
Oh, jeez.
Connard folks, Connard folks. Um, I thought he was adorable, and I thought again they made it very plausible. And then there was like a kind of a triangle there, like slightly. They didn't play into it too much, but it was almost like she was torn between Frank Garner and Burke. You have the all-American boy next door, the lawyer, and then you had this sexy bad guy.
Right.
You know, who is she going to choose?
Right.
Yeah. I think Vicky almost is like yeah, when you were talking about she's the audience, I think didn't B. Arthur describe Dorothy as being in the household the audience? Dorothy represented the normal people, the people who were not insane. And you were sort of seeing it kind of with Dorothy's through Dorothy's lens. And I think that Victoria, I mean, I think that Victoria, um, I don't see her as too often as, I mean, she was in trouble a lot. Somebody had to be, or it would be boring. But she didn't like. I'm with you 100%. She didn't collapse. She had a great sense of urgency. I thought her sense of urgency was incredible. Like when she was locked up in 1795, or when Matthew Creeper Matthew Morgan had her tied up um, in the house. She had that. She conveyed a great sense of panic, just urgency. Like I got to get the hell out of here. What am I going to do? That kind of thing. no less than Maggie when Barnabas held her captive. People are rough with Vicky.
Very rough. She really gets a bum rap, in my opinion. She gets a bum rap. I mean, yeah,
uh,
she is saying I don't understand, and
I almost said that.
I don't understand. I mean, even Alexandra pointed that out. She's like, I was always saying I don't understand what's going on, and going down corridors that I had been forbidden to go down into rooms that were locked. But that's part of the turning the page. It's like
right.
you
Somebody has to do that.
somebody's got to be the one.
Hmm.
So,
That's right.
but again, she wasn't willing. She was not afraid to stick her neck out, and she certainly goes to bat for David with Laura. I mean, that battle of wills. When she's got him in the fishing shack, and you know that this little boy could be moments away from being burned alive. And Vicky is fighting for his soul. It's wild,
I agree.
and
Hell of a hell of a act.
yeah, true heroine. Now, in every sense of the word, it's interesting the way Barnabas weasels his way in just as he's locked up Maggie Evans in the cell. And I believe it's when he finds, David finds Maggie's ring because Maggie has given it to Willie in the hopes that somehow Sam Evans will see it. And David drops it and Vicky picks it up. Barnabas pays a visit to the house. And that's all of a sudden when they start talking about, days gone by and things past. And it's like, oh, well, enough of that Evans girl. This one seems like she's, she, I'm thinking we're going to go with Victoria Winters here.
Well, he says in a scene that is most disturbing, which by the way I love. He's talking about have a party, and he said or something, but he says to Willie, what do you mean? I think I found my next Josette. And he said, well, Barnabas, what do you mean? He said, well, you apply the right you take the right circumstance, you apply pressure where needed, and like he's raising a plant, like he's grooming a prize rose or something. He's telling you his formula for reshaping this girl's mind and soul. It's very frightening, but it is a distinct, Maggie became too much work, too much effort on his part. Was just moving along, moving along.
Yeah, there's a little
Hmm.
farm in Maine where Barnabas grows Josettes.
I know. Oh God, the timeline is that is such, and I love that whole time frame, but that is so disturbing. That is so much more Hannibal Lecter to me than of course the Barnabas we all know and love. And there are some eerie scenes with he and Victoria. I think when they're alone, when he's
After he tells the
you know
story of Josette's death, and she said, "Oh, you used the word bloodless." And it reminds me of what's happened to Maggie Evans. And he senses that she might be in on it and says, "Oh, you know, I'd hate to see what happened to Miss Evans happen to you."
Dun dun dun.
It's
thunderclap.
totally. It's a really great moment. He's like, "Oh my God, now he's going to turn on Victoria."
Hmm. That's right, because in those days he would have, though that you didn't know yet. We didn't, was he was all fresh and new, and he was very creepy, and Victoria was, yeah, it's those I love all of those. That whole dynamic with he and Victoria about I love their relationship. I love when the triangle between the jealousy between Burke and Barnabas, started to get momentum, and he was showing up with books. That he had that scene when he said he inscribed a book to her and he didn't mention it. He was about to leave, and she sees it. The three of them, and there's another innocent moment of hers but you buy it because it's like a little girl. You can. Who of us cannot identify with? Those of us who grew up in blue collar families. Me, if you were in a situation like that, you'd be, especially Dark Shadows, you'd be blown away. Everything that family did would be, and to give you an artifact, that awakens something and you weren't even gonna tell me. It was just fun, just good stuff, creepy, fun stuff.
When she finds the house, when she stumbles upon that house on the shore, and which is called Seaview, which was a little nod to Seaview Terrace. Um, but and Barnabas seemingly knowing the history of the house, and Burke wanting to take her on a date, and Barnabas is there, and she's like, "Oh, we were just going to go look at the house just now. Why don't you come along with us?" And Burke's like, "Yeah, there's nothing better I'd like than the three of us to go see the house by moonlight."
Cockblocker. That's the whole the trespassing sign thing. And Burko. Now, this would have been interesting if it were Mitch Ryan. How the hell did you see that sign? That sign is 50 feet off the road, covered in trees. Are you wandering around out there at night or something along those lines? And it's, there's something happening there. Did Burke, does Burke, what? That would have been really cool to be played by Mitch Ryan.
He says, "You must have the eyes of a cat, Mr. Collins."
That's it.
Oh, right.
That's it. He wanders around upstairs. Yeah.
I just
Uh,
love.
uh,
And then he wants to leave Barnabas alone in the house, and he really pisses Vicky off.
Ditch him.
It's a little bit, and I always thought with Mitch Ryan, I thought Mitch Ryan would have made the perfect Brom Bones in The Legend of Sleepy Hollow because he had that look. And
Right.
I almost feel like Vicky, was she really in love with Barnabas, or was she just goading Burke? Was she a sly puss? And was she, kind of playing into Barnabas's affections to maybe,
I'd like to think she was more pure than that.
you think?
Yeah, and I love the fact that it ends up being Vicky as Josette for a bunch of reasons, not the least of which is, yes, she came from a humble beginnings, but she was a woman of letters. She knew history. She was fascinated by literature. There were so many things that just aligned up for her to be the perfect, well, quite frankly, not only the perfect foil, but the perfect victim. She was so fascinated, and it makes sense that she would, in her brain, would click to becoming Josette, versus Maggie, who's working class, questions everything. She's had drunk people come into the diner, wanting coffee to kind of sober up. So I would think that Maggie would be much more cynical and jaded, and be harder for him to actually get there, despite the powers of a vampire. So anyway,
Well, Maggie's will was too strong.
Really
That's
good
the whole
point.
point. Maggie does fight it. She does finally break free of his will. I mean, Barnabas has to be a little bit stupid like all villains because all he had to do was drain her dry and that would have been it.
right.
And that's a really, really good point. I never thought of that. That Vicky, as far as Mash, Barnabas and Vicky would have been and truly well matched, and that's what makes it all the sadder, which Miss Parker used in her stories. The sadder when Barnabas becomes mortal, and like that, the spell he had on Vicky was broken, and she's already out of love with him.
Right.
She goes to the hospital, and he's all excited. He's making plans. Finally, I'm human. I can take you off. And she's like, yeah, about you and I leaving, don't less. And so it's all the because they are so beautifully matched. And yeah, that's right. Maggie would have, yeah, that would have been a bad situation.
And we won't give anything away, but the nod that Lamar does in the last book to to the whole plot line and how it aligns to Alexandra Moltke in real life. That's all I'll say there. So worth a read.
It's very Romana Clay, yeah. Yeah, I love Heiress of Collinwood. If you have not read it,
Romana Clay,
Romana Clay.
cadre to Romana Clay. Wow, it's
Romana Clay.
here's a quarter for that word.
Thank you.
Well, does Laura Parker read that? Is that available in audio?
It
I don't
was
think so.
it was recorded.
It's
It was
recorded but not
recorded
released.
in the months leading up to her death, and it has not been released yet. Yeah,
Oh, I'm holding on for that. She does when you listen to her read the stories, and I don't. It's funny because she when she and all of her stories when she describes Collinwood, I mean, you're there. Listening to her description of Collinwood and the ballroom and everything, you are there. So wait for her. I urge you to get both, but definitely listen to Miss Parker read these stories. It's
totally.
God rest her. It was lovely.
A friend of ours who has passed on thought that Lamar's writing was too flowery and too descriptive. I completely disagree.
The first
Yeah.
book, Angelique's Descent, by her own admission, Lamar said that's a little more romance oriented. She kind of started to get away from that with the Salem branch, and but Angelique's Descent is a little more on the flowery side than the other books are. But
Respected.
Heiress of Collinwood is great, and she does tap into real life situations that Miss Moltke went through, and uses it as a plot device. And we don't have to say anything more than that. We should also mention, too, I've got them in front of me, that, of course, she was immortalized.
Look at that. It's no longer backwards. I fixed it.
I had a feeling you reversed the image. The old Marilyn Ross paperbacks. This is one of the photograph covers, Victoria Winters, which is a lot of fun. Hermes Press has re-released these, and this is one of the art covers, which I love the art covers. I wish they had done more art covers. Although someone pointed out that
Yeah.
this Victoria Winters looks more like Betsy Durkin, the second Victoria Winters, than it does Alexandra.
Oh, sure enough.
But I do love the art covers. Check these out, guys. They're great. And Catherine Lee Scott reads all of them. She has read all 32 novels.
Wow.
So check those out, because the first several are just like the beginning.
Does she read the
That
cookbook?
picture of Jonathan Frid and Alexandra Moltke, they both have similar, like to DJ's point, they both have similar, yes, they have noble bearing, which, they really do. Like, I mean, you can see the Shakespearean kind of theater in him, and you can see that nobility in her in those pictures. It's interesting. They would have made a lovely royal couple. They could have played
Out of curiosity, did Ben take that picture?
No. I forget who took these photos.
Just curious.
That's a story in and of itself.
May I see that?
Sure.
Thank you.
I'm moving right along. So then they bring, Vicky back into the full focus. I mean, Maggie is still very much the B storyline, because they're still trying to figure out who kidnapped her, how to gain her memory back. And then you have all the wonderful moments between Julia and Vicky, where Julia is so obviously jealous of Victoria, where she dresses her down for taking up too much of Barnabas's time. And then Barnabas reprimands her, and she gives Vicky the flowers, and moments later they're dead on the table, which I thought was priceless. So sleight of hand.
He rips it out of her hand. I love that scene.
And even he's horrified, and I always thought that was Sarah. I thought it was Sarah that made the flowers go dead.
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Because the look on his face is like, what the bleep just happened?
Yeah.
But I
We
love
had
that too.
discussion about Sarah having the Collins streak. She's got, for a little girl, she's still got the Collins streak. Like, she's hard-headed and when she needs to be, and brave and all that.
And
So,
Julia luring her,
um,
hypnotizing her, and luring her to the coffin.
I want you to say it. Julia's line when he has to cancel this evening with Vicky. I love that line.
You have to forego an appointment with Vicky. That must be a bitter pill to swallow.
I
wish my voice wasn't.
And then she, even better, with all that stuff in it.
Oh god.
Well, that's like that, and then she denies being jealous of her. That's what blows my mind. It's like, oh, okay, sure. No, not at all.
Yeah. Yeah. There's
Mm-mm-mm.
so many layers. I love the stuff that's going on then between him and Julia and Vicky. Those are some really, really great scenes in there. I love that.
Oh yeah,
Of
yeah.
course, she finds herself back in 1795. I think it is the best flashback on the show. There are some people that feel it's 1897. With all due respect to David Selby, I think it's second, and I think it's second best. I think 1795 is the all,
It's so funny you say
be
this.
all, end all.
So Carrie Perwicka just wrote, "Are you guys going to talk about any particular storyline? I'm about to watch the 1795 storyline. Love to hear your thoughts on it."
We read your mind. We read your mind, Carrie. Yes, we're going to talk about 1795. Um, Penny Dreadful, who we love, she was a guest on our show a few weeks ago.
Make sure you watch Terror at Collinwood,
Watch
our
Terror at
podcast.
Collinwood, please. Um, I know it's 1897 is her go-to. Which she said, if I had to introduce somebody new to the show, she has said many times that she would show them 1897. But I don't know. I feel 1795 is the better bet. If you're going to introduce someone to the crux of the Dark Shadows story, that's just my opinion.
I, I think I love them both. I think I do. I love both timelines. I think the feel of them is completely different. I think 1795 has a much more Shakespearean, kind of a heavy classical piece. It actually feels like a heavy classical storyline, and I think it's superb. I mean, and what I mean by that is, I mean, there's in the toward the end it gets a little long, but the Barnabas Angelique Josette story is beyond a doubt incredible. You have to watch that. The difference is I think you have like the Universal cycle when they would do Frankenstein or Dracula or they were contained and it was great. And then they would do like and again I love the 1897, the Count Patolfi, the Quentin thing, but he hit a peak at some time where it's like they try to put too many monsters in one film, and you can't spend enough time on each. So I think you've got that with the 1897, and then toward the end it went on and on and on and on. But the earlier days and Quentin and Barnabas, they're great. I don't want to take anything away from that, but 1795 is a superior alone story. It's an alone. It was, Quentin, you involve everything. So much going on in the Quentin storyline. But with Matt Pelfy, Julianka, 1795, you've got Barnabas and Angelique, and then Bethia Mep. And then, it's kind of it's a more developed piece, I think.
Also, too, it's funny you say that because in 1988, the Dance Theater Workshop of Manhattan actually did the 1795 storyline as a one-shot play for several weeks. They took it, they
Oh, wow.
dwindled it down, whittled it down into a 2 hour play. Um, and I don't think it's not the guy who just passed away. Julian Stone, soap opera actor, played Barnabas. I know that. I think his name was Julian Stone. And it is on video. I wish
Oh,
that MPI would release it as a bonus because it was filmed. And yeah, that was like in 1987 or somewhere around there that they did it just as a contained play, the 1795 storyline.
Julian Stone.
and you see, in 1795, you've got, like I said, because you're only focusing on Barnabas instead of the vampire and the werewolf and the witch and the wizard. You've got the vampire, sometimes the witch and the ghost or whatever. But Barnabas, what they were actually showing him figuring himself as a vampire out. You know, I've realized that I have strange, unusual powers, and the whole Trask screwing with, you see where he's to see figure he's got psychic abilities and the pain of losing his, I always call it the countdown from Sarah to Jeremiah to Joe. You get all of that, whereas the Quentin timeline, there's so much going on, which again, I love the speed and I love this timeline, but they're just distinctly apples and oranges as far, and even the quality is and they would have, and so good that they said it in 1795, because I'd heard that there was a discussion about maybe doing 1800s, so much better in 1700s. It's such more American to me that way, more colonial. It's
The
much more
writers,
fun.
again, early on, everything was 1810, 1820, 1830. Those were a lot of the dates that we heard early on in the show about Josette coming to live at Collinwood and Jeremiah being the master of the house. And so much of that history then changed. They really did rewrite history, which, as Julia Hoffman points out later on in the show, the Collins family history has never been known for its accuracy, Barnabas.
Well, and then look, Vicky even says and then they don't let it slide. Vicky says to Barnabas, even at one point, it didn't go the way you told me it went. She calls him on the Jeremiah Josette thing. She's like, that didn't go how you said it was going. And I think that's a great bit that they added there. They acknowledged it, so it's a lot of fun. You're going to love it. Keep
You're
watching,
gonna,
madam. You'll love it.
and I would just say, if I was going to introduce somebody, I would say, watch 1795 to the moment where Ben Stokes chains the coffin and closes the door. Then I would go in and watch from episode 210 on, because now you're going to go in with a better idea of who Barnabas was and why he's acting the way he did. That's how I would have somebody watch the show, almost in a kind of a reverse way. But they send Vicky back in time.
Cloud Lily
Yes.
watches every single week, and she agrees. 1795 explains the Collins family we've come to know in the beginning episodes. So she's on the same page as us.
Thank you, Cloud Lily. Thank you. They send Vicky back, and what I love about it, that they only hint at, except in the NBC series, they go all out. She really is in The Wizard of Oz, because it's, and you were there, and you were there, and you were there. They all look the same. It's like, oh my God, now it's, no, you're Mrs. Stoddard. No, I'm not. I'm Mrs. Collins. Who's Mrs. Stoddard? It's great. The way it's played, it really was. I got to give it to Curtis. It really was a stroke of genius to have that kind of Wizard of Oz feel to it, that she really is like Dorothy, like, where am I and how do I get home? Which, Carrie, if you watch
And then the audience has to deal with that.
Yes.
The audience has to deal with the fact that that's Grayson, but she's not behaving at all like Doc, because you're dealing with it along with Vicky. Vicky seeing Dr. Hoffman, banning Dr. Hoffman, she's being treated completely differently than Julia treated her. It's you're going through that with her, so it is. I agree with you. It's a stroke of genius.
Yeah, really, really good. And then we have the witch hunter to end all witch hunters.
Real quick shout out to Mama Michael. Geraldine is out there, so hello.
Hello, Mama Michael.
Oh, hello, mother. Hello, mommy.
I love that she
Ma.
tunes in every week. Ma.
That's what I call her, Ma. Ma. She's Dark Shadows has been with her as long as it's been with me. So God bless.
That's great.
Been with all of us as I raise my Wolfie here.
That's right. That's right.
So once again, another moment where Vicky, and this irks me. I've read it on so many. There's one fan that goes after her concept. She's a teacher. She should know better. She set herself up. Da 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 da. It's like, how would any of us feel if we were thrust back 200 years in time?
Bingo.
Not knowing what the is going on. I mean, cut the girl some slack. They attack her for this, and I just think
My father used to say, "It ain't in the script." That's why. That's what my father said. You know why? Because it's in the script.
It's in the script.
It's got. I mean, there are technical elements that you have to adhere. Somebody's got to do these things. things, you know.
And of course,
Mm.
she's going to talk about modern day things. She's not, she's been bumped on the head figuratively and sent into this time warp. And now she's got to deal with this a hole, and she really sticks it to him. This is great. We got that clip.
Miss Winters, where were you when Barnabas Collins was seized by a fit of choking 2 weeks ago?
I was here in my room.
You know what caused that seizure, don't you?
No, of course not.
Now, there is no reason to lie to me, girl.
I'm not lying.
I am not here to harm you, only to help you.
I can't believe you're all serious about this.
We consider witchcraft a very serious matter. It'll do you no good to evade the Reverend's questions. He knows how to deal with people like you.
I knew you were coming here to ask me some questions, but I never thought it was going
You
to be...
knew before we arrived at your door that we were coming here.
Yes.
How did you know it?
Never mind.
I asked you how you knew.
Take your hand off of me.
There is possession here. The signs are unmistakable. How long have you been in league with the devil?
Now you've just stopped this, because I'm not in league with anyone. I've never done a thing to harm anyone in this house.
You have tried and you have succeeded. You have carried out the devil's instructions since the day you arrived here.
That's ridiculous.
You have used your spells and potions and incantations to inflict bodily harm and cause mental aberrations.
I've done no such thing. Why won't you listen to what I'm saying?
You caused the disappearance of the master of this house through an act of black magic.
No!
You have used your trickery to sow the seeds of dissension and hatred among the members of the Collins family, a God-fearing people who would never willingly do the devil's bidding.
Will you please get out of here and leave me alone? I told you not to touch me.
Don't you understand, girl? You must not resist. You must pray to the heavens for your salvation.
I told you to get out of here and leave me alone.
You dare strike a man of God.
He's no man of God. He's a fanatic. If anyone is possessed by the devil, he is.
Reverend Trask.
Now you listen to me, girl. You be quiet and listen carefully. If you will not bring yourself to God, then I will bring God to you.
Let me out of here, somebody, please.
Oh, you mean thing.
What? Oh my God. Vicky, there's a bunch of people right now in office. I would love for you to do that too.
By the way, anyone else think it's precious that Reverend Trask has a long yellow kerchief in his...
He was
That was a
married. We
dandy.
do find out he was
A dandy
married.
man.
He was a dandy.
Well, did first of all, how brilliant he was too, Mr. Lacey. What a great actor he
Brilliant.
is. But that scene is so well put together for a lot of different reasons. You see the collision in the two cultures. In other words, Natalie Dupre, although she's superstitious, is put off by his kind of puritanical behavior, and in the way they come from a whole different you get that kind of pull there, but also Millicent's such a snatch. She is so terrible.
Oh, Abigail. Abigail.
Not Millicent. Abigail. She's so awful that you wish death on her right away. But she was tough. Once again, Vicky backed into a corner, stands her ground.
Yeah, I love when she gives it to him. And it's so unnerving when he slaps her back. And that's for 2 minutes where you think the Countess is going to have a change of heart, which, again, we'll talk about the new series later on, but I like that they corrected all of that in the 91 series. Josette, everybody comes to her side. Abigail is the only one that turns on her.
And you know what, too? Fanatic. Her use of the word fanatic, that's not something you would have heard in the 60s when it came to a
Right.
religious figure. That would have been more toned down. You're dealing with, again, those kind of under Dark Shadows issues. religious intolerance of other people, all of that kind of thing. It's coming out in things that you would never have heard that in that era. So again, beautifully written, beautifully played.
And the fact that she's trying, because she has the book, she knows everything that's going to happen, and she's trying to change history. She's trying to prevent Josette from falling off Widow's Hill. She's trying to prevent Sarah from running out into the cold, you know, days before her birthday, and she's trying to fix everything.
Yeah,
And in the end, she saves
there's that
Daniel. I mean,
urgency.
she really puts herself on the line having been wounded because without Daniel, you don't have any more Collinses.
Yeah. And you get a sense, if one is really paying attention, her being in 1795, you get an immediate sense of what Barnabas would have felt in the 1960s when he first came out.
It's the reverse.
Oh wow, you look just like my mother. Oh my God, you look like my father. Oh my God, you look like Gisette. Oh my God, that you have all of that. Yeah, you have that whole dynamic is lived out, but in reverse. Cool.
And of course, she gets yet another man. She gets Peter Bradford. For 2 minutes, I thought it was going to be Nathan Forbes. For 2 minutes, I
Yeah,
thought there was a little flirtation there, and he's trying to protect her. And then I think it had to be
right.
Joel, because Joel was so sick of playing the boy next door that I think he really pushed the writers and said, "Look, you got to let me be the bad guy."
Yeah, and he did beautifully, by the
He
way.
did. He did it to perfection. And Peter Bradford is probably my favorite of Roger Davis's characters. To me, he's the most likable
Yeah,
because he does
yeah.
go to bat for her. And there's a very sweet scene which we were going to play tonight, but it's when she's explaining to him what the 20th century is like and how we go flying. We get into machines that fly, and he's looking at her like, I, I'm falling in love with you, but I think you really are crazy. Um,
Mm,
but it's such a well played scene between the two of them. Um, but again, every time Vicky got another guy, whoop, you know, she was off to the gallows. Um, then in the present day, there he is. He's Jeff Clark. He's stealing the cadavers for Dr. Lang. They get married. He disappears into thin air. You poor girl never. Frank Garner, Burke Devlin. She never quite. And they hint at it with Jeremiah
Don't
for
get
two
married,
minutes.
Loretta. It don't work out. Don't get married, Loretta. It don't work out for you.
It don't work out for you.
Eddie
Yeah.
Lucas. Eddie Lucas is watching from Guatemala,
Hey, Eddie.
and he wants us to know it's a very good
Edward?
point, beginning with the 1795 storyline for newcomers. And he's not the only one. Several people have said they've never thought about the Wizard of Oz correlation. And to that end, Abigail's about as nasty as the Wicked Witch. So, but yes, hello, Eddie. Eddie, we love you.
We love you, Eddie. And it's, yes, I mean, the Wizard of Oz corollary in the new show, in the NBC series, um, where they were able to do split screen. So Joanna Going could play Victoria Winters as well as Josette. Josette's walking down the hallway and she hears a voice singing, and it's Vicky strumming a guitar or whatever the equivalent to 1790 was for the mandolin or whatever she's strumming there. Um, and what is she? She's singing to Sarah and Daniel. She's singing Over the Rainbow. And
Yeah.
and Josette walks in and she says, "That was very pretty. What was that?" And she says, "Oh, it's about a little girl named Dorothy who loses her way and wants to get home." And she says, "Oh, Over the Rainbow. That's very, very sweet." So they really go, they hit you over the head with it. But being a huge Judy Garland fan, just a little bit, I love that. I love that.
Yeah.
We've talked about that before, Michael.
Oh yeah. It's sweet. It is. And I didn't realize how I didn't think about the whole Miss Gulch Abigail thing until just now. But it is true, and it is. She does have the same sort of support system as in the Wizard of Oz in the revival. they do, she's got the goodies and the baddies, and I do want to say too, of the Reverend Trasks, this one is the most likable. What I mean by that is not well acted, because he does beautifully as all, but you like that you can see where this guy really thinks he's doing, whereas like Gregory and all, they're just totally awful people. This guy is honestly convinced, at least himself, that he's doing what he's doing for a purpose. That's the last you'll see of that with the
We
other
sh-
ones.
we should point out that the name Trask is a historical name, and Peter and I have had the pleasure of meeting one of the descendants of the Trasks.
In Salem, Massachusetts. Yeah, the Trask family goes back.
Yep.
They were not witch hunters,
No.
but they do go back that far to the Salem witch trials.
And one of the coolest things ever for Peter wrote a book called Cinema Salem, came out about
2007.
Yeah, so quite a number of years ago. But we interviewed Richard Trask, who is the official historian for the town of Danvers.
Curator, archivist. Danvers was the original Salem.
That's right.
Yes, it was Salem Village and Salem Town.
And he brought us into a very, very large safe where you could stand up. And he put white gloves on us. And we actually got to hold the transcripts of the girls confessing that they made it up.
Not that they made it up. That they're about. It was their testimonials
to who
the witches were.
That's right.
Because no one ever
false,
fessed up.
They're false testimony. That's right. I apologize.
But yeah, these ledgers that look like the Collins family history. They're these books from 1692.
In the hands of Judge Hathorne. Yeah,
I mean, it was incredible to see those. But so when you come to Salem, you'll see Trask Avenue, Trask Street, Trask. Trask is all over the place in Salem, which is very fitting if you're a Dark Shadows fan.
And kudos to the city of Salem, because 2 days ago they just opened a permanent exhibit at the Peabody Essex Museum. It's the first time they've done this, and it is a permanent installation where they have artifacts from the witch trials, artifacts from the falsely accused, artifacts from the accusers. Pretty remarkable stuff. So I'm sorry for that sidetrack, but
that's okay.
We're allowed up there.
Yeah.
Yes. In Hocus Pocus, the new one, they use the name Trask.
Yes,
but
the mayor.
That's more of a nod to Dark Shadows than the necessarily the historical. That was directly because of Reverend Trask from Dark Shadows. But I did not know. I got to get my fat arse up there.
You'll love it. You'll love it. You'll love it. It's very much like Hollandsport. It is very much like Hollandsport, especially when there's mist. And you go down to the docks. It's very much like Hollandsport. More mist.
There's the rock.
I think, once we get back into the present day, and she's met Jeff Clark, and very kindly tosses Barnabas aside, she's interwoven into the Adams storyline, but it's clear by her own admission, Alexandra wanted off the show. She just felt like she had done all she could do. She was tired of being the victim. So even for you fans out there who call her the, quintessential victim, she felt like she was too much of a victim. She wanted something juicier to play. And she also was getting ready to be a mommy. Just before 1795, she takes David to Boston for 2 weeks. She got married and went on her honeymoon. That's why she disappears for 2 weeks before 1795. Nancy Barrett was her matron of honor.
Marvelous.
So that's why she goes away. But she did become pregnant, and she's always maintained, I was getting pregnanter and pregnanter, and they didn't seem like they were in a hurry to get rid of me. And Rosemary's Baby had just come out. And I thought, what do they have planned for me? Because she's starting to show. If you see some of those episodes, she's starting to show. Now, some of you know Laura Parker. Lamar was a good friend of mine and DJ's. And She liked Alexandra very much, but when we interviewed her, and even off camera, she said she didn't want to be there anymore.
Yeah.
She didn't want to have her makeup done. She didn't want to have her hair done. She just made it very clear that she wanted out. So Laura never quite bought the story about getting, she knew she was pregnant. She wasn't making that up. But she also kind of said she really didn't want to be there anymore, Peter. She really just wanted out. And they wanted her to stay and they wanted her to come back. And apparently Leela Swift would call her every couple of months trying to get her back. And even near the end, in that last year in 1971, she tried very vehemently to get her back. And she said, only if I can be possessed or if I can be a vampire or give me something to play. I want something meatier to play. It would have been nice in the end if Dan Curtis hadn't been such a hard hat, if the story could have been wrapped up where they would have, I'm sure if they went to her and said, listen, it's only going to be 10 weeks, come back, we're going to wrap up the story, reveal that you're Elizabeth's daughter, and we're going to put a pretty pink bow on it. That I think she might have done.
Right.
Only Alexandra could answer that question for us. But I believe if it had been that way, they would have done that. I think one of the sweetest moments on the show is when she's going to marry Jeff Clark. It's one of my favorites, and it's also bittersweet because as a fan, you know that her time is coming up.
Yeah.
So beautiful.
Naomi Collins imported it from France for her wedding to Joshua.
I hope nothing will happen to it.
Nothing will. It will bring you good luck.
Mrs. Stoddard, thank you.
Oh, I want you to wear it.
Not just for the veil, but for the wedding, everything.
No.
When I think of how I felt that day on the train when I was first coming here, when I didn't know you or Roger or anyone, and I wondered if you would like me, a stranger.
You were never that.
I've always thought of myself as that ever since I can remember. Only now, sometimes I think I dreamt it all. Sometimes I even have the feeling that I actually grew up here.
I think that, too. I almost can't remember when you weren't here. Oh, yes, I can. I remember David. He was so much more difficult then than he is now. You've made an enormous change in me, Vicky. We're all going to miss you very much.
Oh, don't think that. Now that I've found you all, I'm not going to disappear. Collinwood will always mean home to me.
Oh, that was interesting. You were never a stranger. You were never that. That's interesting.
Just a little.
Those maternal scenes again between the two of them. Yeah, they work so well, the two of them. I guess resemblance helps a lot too. Like Carolyn and Joan Bennett don't look alike, but Victoria and Elizabeth do have a lot of. So you can buy it so much easier looking at her and thinking, oh
Sure.
yeah, that's totally her. But she was going to give her a freaking wing of the house of the great house. You don't do that for employees. You know?
It's true.
It's just seems to me, a little bit familial.
And of course, she is going to disappear, and we hate to give spoilers here, so close your ears if you don't know. Eventually, Alexandra walks through a door and comes out like the next day, and it's a new Victoria Winters. It's Betsy Durkin taking over for her. And then eventually Carolyn Groves in a quick flashback to 1796. We're not going to talk about those two ladies tonight. I want to save that.
Okay.
It's a great debate about whether it worked or whether it didn't work.
It didn't work.
We have John's opinion already. I want to save that for another time. But it is sad because she was such a pivotal part of the show. She did start it all. It's funny when she says, it seems like it's all been a dream. There was a Dark Shadows fan who I think made this up. And I won't say who they are because they're very very well loved in fandom. They said, the plan was Dan Curtis was going to end the show all of a sudden with Vicky on the train in her trench coat and driving up and the doors opening up. Welcome to Collinwood. And they're out. And another friend of mine in fandom said, I think that they're copying a little bit of the Newhart finale. Dan Curtis never Dan Curtis never had that idea, but it would have been a very interesting ending.
That she dreamed up.
That Vicky had dreamed it all.
Interesting.
But we love Alexandra, and she was such an important part of the show.
Oh, yeah.
She's so endearing. She's so lovely. You had a crush on her. I certainly had a crush on her. You wanted her to be your big sister.
She still works.
She does wonderful documentaries about the Holocaust and the Romani. And, she's very, very, very great businesswoman, very smart, very sharp. She never went to a Dark Shadows convention, but as you pointed out, she went to the Paley Center reunion with Dan Curtis, and Jonathan Frid wasn't there for that, but she was there, and it was sweet because Mitch Ryan is there, and there's so many photos of the two of them hugging, and it's like Vicky and Burke together again.
Oh, I'll have to watch that panel again too. I enjoyed watching that a lot, quite a lot actually.
Yeah, that's on YouTube. You can watch that. So, I think that she gets a bum rap, and I would have liked to have seen her stay with the show or come back at a certain point. And I believe that Mark B. Perry's device for the new show, the sequel series, Dark Shadows Reincarnation, or Reincarnation Dark Shadows, is a girl comes to Collinsport on the train, and it's Victoria Winter's daughter. That's how it opens.
Wow. By the way, we should mention no details were given, but Catherine Lee Scott did confirm that there will be a revival. So no specifics were given other than that.
This particular show is still very much
a go,
plodding forward. So fingers crossed that we get it.
I know 3 actors who would be very good as we could be townies.
We'll do anything. We'll be the hand of Count Patofi.
I can deliver the Collinsport Star. Right?
That's right.
So I think that's great.
I can buttle.
You got it.
I'm the butler. I buttle.
Oh,
you and your undershirt would take 2 days back.
This was a great...
This was a lot of fun.
Amazing episode.
I hope that all you guys out there enjoyed it. It's fun celebrating Miss Moltke. I don't think she realizes how loved she was and still is.
Hey B, a frequent tuner inner, wrote, Alexandra Moltke still looks the same for me.
She does. She still has all that hair.
I've seen her.
She still has all that hair, God love her. Beautiful, beautiful lady. So, in honor of, we're going to raise a wolfie to Victoria Winters.
I don't have my real one.
We'll just, whatever you can raise there. There we go. We love you, Alexandra. We love you, Victoria Winters. And we will be back next week. Again, please tune in to the other Dark Shadows podcasts. Terror at Collinwood, hosted by Penny Dreadful. Between the Shadows, lovely, lovely ladies. They're fabulous. I've got to catch up on their podcasts. Admittedly, I am not in the know on those as much. Resident of Collinwood, check them all out. And Dark Shadows Every Day is something that you should be checking out. These are all wonderful. Don't forget, guys, hit like and subscribe. Doesn't cost you anything, and it helps us out a lot. We will be back again next week Stay tuned for the upcoming theme. I want to thank Michael Panzerato, as always, for joining us, Dr. John Mack
It's a pleasure.
for being a great techie and also being part of the panel, and stay in the shadows. Have a good night.